If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Lore by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we continue the Lore by Night How to Vampire series, a mini-series that aims to improve the role-playing of players and storytellers during tabletop sessions. This episode will focus on portraying the titles of the Anarch Movement. The Anarch Movement. Anybody who has been following the podcast and my social media profiles would know that out of the three main sects in Vampire the Masquerade, the Anarchs are my least favourite by a mile. I, as an individual, find it very difficult to sympathise with their motive, which really says a lot about my privileged white male background. I have never been one to say, fuck the establishment, so it is very difficult for me to insert a character, an extension of myself, in that sort of scenario. I can rant about it on Twitter till the cows come home, but I don't have the gumption to actually do something about my issues. But I am not stubborn enough in my own beliefs to admit that there are some great advantages to playing an Anarch. I will also add that there is a surprising amount of depth to the sect that many overlook, haven't thought about, or just straight up don't know about. There are many ways one may approach the Anarch concept, and everyone will tell you something completely different. However, you're not here for just anyone's opinion. You came here for mine, and that is what I intend to deliver, in the hope that some of what I may say will be able to enhance your sessions. All thoughts and opinions are my own, so if you disagree with something I have said, that is totally fine. It does not mean that you're right and I am wrong and vice versa. I will begin by repeating things I said in the previous episodes of this series, which are how to make awesome and believable characters for creating the core character concept. I would also suggest it is worthwhile listening to my podcast episode about the Anarch Movement, as that will give you all that you need to know about their origins and basic breakdown of the different roles found within the sect. I am also going to recommend you listen to the video that Southhampton by Night Vampire's YouTube channel did on the movement, as the character he created for that episode just encapsulates an Anarch vampire perfectly. If you like it, give the video a like, and maybe subscribe to more of his content, perhaps leave a comment saying that I sent you there. So having listened to the Anarch Movement podcast episode and the Southhampton by Night Vampire's Anarch video, we can summarise the sect with just a few sentences. Anarchs are vampires who reject the status quo of canine society. They resent the privileged status held by the elders within the Camarilla and other vampire sects. When the eldest hold the most power in a society of immortals, the loss of neonates is not a happy one. They do not like the Sabbat for this reason, yet are still the most likely to be chosen as recruits. Chances are, the Anarchs would probably view them as fucked up devil worshippers, not able to fully understand their rites and rituals. That said, as some younger Sabbat recruits are now defecting to the movement in V5 metaplot, most notably the fucking Zemnitsi, this attitude may well change in your settings. It should be noted here that up until V5, the Anarchs were not a sect of its own right. Under the terms of the Convention of Thorns, the Anarchs were considered a faction of the Camarilla by its members, but unlike the Sabbat, they were tolerated. A lot of Anarchs, in my mind at least, would forget or ignore this. You'd be hard-pressed to find a boring nerd like me in the movement, for example. I also think that it is highly unlikely that they would refer to themselves as a movement. It implies the Anarchs are a passing fad, like a fashion statement or the latest Twitter trend. The Anarchs are Anarchs, and anyone who says otherwise can shove their head up their arse sideways. All of them this vulgar and blunt? Yes, that's why they are fucking Anarchs. Making a violent stand to the superiors hiding in the shadows is their whole thing. Talk first, think later. The sect has spent its whole existence fighting the oppressive Camarilla that ruled over them. Now independent from the Ivory Tower in the V5 metaplot, that fight has only intensified. The red question of, why do you obey, rings very loudly in the ears of all young vampiric hopefuls. On the topic of ringing, something the Anarchs have always had over the Camarilla is the use of technology. No, I do not believe that elder vampires are dum-dums when it comes to tech. That is stupid. However, the Anarchs are more likely to know what is hip and what is the in thing. Try explaining to your grandma what TikTok is, and try and convince her that it is something beyond the noise of her grandfather clock. Now have that same conversation with a 500-year-old vampire. technology is a powerful weapon that one may use to gain an advantage over the opposition in terms of communication. I will add that the narrative that everything we do ends up on the internet is false, especially when it comes to vampires. Think about it. If you saw a vampire frenzy, which translates to someone human-looking, ripping and tearing someone apart with their hands and teeth, eating and devouring their flesh, your first instinct would not whip out your phone and upload it to YouTube. What would actually happen is that you would run as fast as your fucking legs would carry you away from there and call the police, if your head was in the right place to do so. Now, you could make a plot for a Hunter's Hunted or Hunter the Reckoning game based around this idea, but the average Joe would not pursue this, and they certainly wouldn't be able to convince anyone that vampires are real. Beyond the blatantly obvious, vampires across all the sects have had systems in place to deal with these one-off instances. Yes, a lot of fucked up shit exists on the internet, but not all of it does. Only an unpleasant selection of highlights, for lack of a better term. But I digress. One thing that has changed, or rather developed, in terms of metaplot between revised V20 and V5 is the origins of the Anarch Movement, something that I was not aware of when I wrote and recorded my Anarch lore episode almost 2 years ago as of this recording. Yes, it is the first revolt that the Anarchs got their name, but it is in Carthage where the Anarch bonfire was first kindled, or to be more precise, its destruction by the hand of the Ventru, enemies of its rulers and the leading clans of the movement, the Bruja. More often than not, a Bruja who was aware of Carthage is likely to celebrate it for all of its glory and things that they attempt to do, each one presenting it in a slightly different way, forgetting a fact here, making up something there, emphasising the previous point I made that they are not ones for history, in the sense that they would not have it all written down in some holy scripture. For the most part, there is no real hero worship either, but that is not to say the Anarchs do not have leaders and kindred they follow. We all know that it is the Baron that calls the shots, despite having limited power when compared to that of a prince. There are a few reasons for this. If they wielded the same control a prince would, they would be seen as dictators, no better than the Elders of the Ivory Tower, which may or may not be by design of the Baron. Anarchs are not vampire superheroes, a direct quote I have seen far too many times, for which I am blaming LA by Night for, as it is where such VTM fans got that idea from. The Anarchs can be just as fucked up as any other sect. The input of a Baron is more advisor than policy on matters not concerning the Masquerade and Domain. Anarchs don't really follow the other traditions besides this, plus paying lip service to the tradition of hospitality, simply because the traditions are in place to protect the ones at the top as the workers beneath them suffer. Under the right conditions, a Baron could easily become a cult leader. What if you had a Baron who knew what the Vinculum was? Sabbat is only a political ideology after all. Now if that sounds stupid to you, take a look at Carthage as an actual VTM example. Minus the cult stuff, the lack of Ponzi rules to remember makes playing an Anarch as a first time player a potential recommended move. In this circumstance, treating the Anarchs as light Camarilla might be a gentle way of introducing players into the setting. There are also the roles that I mentioned in the Anarch lore episode to consider, which are the Emissary, Sweeper and Chameleon. You also have the Reeve, which essentially is the Anarch equivalent of a sheriff but without the prestige and more suspicion. Warlords are exactly what they sound like, and are ruled by inspirational bullies, whilst Coyotes help kindred defecting from the Camarilla or Sabbat into the Anarch domains who may be willing to share the secrets of their loot, for the lack of a better term, for a boon or cash. After all, the Anarch can live their own life without restriction. In case my tone wasn't clear, positions of power are not always appreciated or respected by the Anarchs, but few are stupid enough to forgo them entirely. You now have an expanded Lore by Night description of the Anarchs and their roles. You have been educated a bit more how they operate and their attitude to unlife and those around them, but how do you put your own spin on these things? I ask that because the richness of this game comes from investing time into your character, their goals, and how they will fuck the opposition just by existing. I address this in my How to Make Awesome and Believable Characters episode and every character creation tutorial episode I have ever done, because you should be asking yourself every possible question to not only make them fit into your chronicle, but to make them a believable person. Don't think about the dots on the character sheet as just dots and expressions of their powers. They are extensions of the character. A good ST will look at your character sheet and know what sort of person they are and whether they match up with whatever concept you have given them. But what about the STs themselves? How does one make those Anarch titles that little bit more interesting in the games? Just like I said in the How to Make Awesome and Believable Characters episode, why not change things up a little bit? Yes, many of the canonical barons are Brujah, but only a small portion of the world has been covered by the official books. Even so, you don't have to adhere to that. Sure, you can use your knowledge and clan lore to help you define a character for your given title, but don't solely think about the clans and their powers, the crunch, so to speak. They do not speak to who and what the person is. Whilst all character concepts can really shine in any sect and setting, I believe it is with an Anarch game where they can really take off. On a mechanical level, they are written and presented in such a way where you, the player, can truly be free without some stingy elder barking down at you. You can truly make them unique with little restrictions as leadership as an option. They could still be Camarilla and Sabbat Light, or they could be dark mirrors of either of them. There is no real discrimination amongst clans. As long as you are prepared to turn opinion into actuality, you are an Anarch. I want to reiterate two things before we conclude the episode. First of all, everything I've just presented to you is my own opinion. At the end of the day, you can do whatever you want to do. As long as everyone is having fun and feeling that political horror, then you're playing the game correctly, and that is okay. The other thing I wish to reinforce is that I have only presented a mere portion of my knowledge and takes on tonight's topic. Why would I give you all my secrets? Trick question, I fucking wouldn't. I can reveal, however, that all my knowledge comes from the book, so go and read them if you want to learn more. Again, it is not needed to enjoy the game, but if you want to develop your character concept within the grander lore, go and legally purchase the books and read them. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to have a bleach bath to remove all this Anarch positivity filth from me. To be kept updated, follow the Lore by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.